In the beginning, there was only the Aether and the Keepers. The Aether encompassed the entirety of the multiverse, stretching across an infinite number of dimensions and timelines. The Keepers were the first living entities to exist within the Aether. The primordial Keeper, known as the First One, created the Summoning Key as the first artifact in all of creation. Little did he know that this one artifact would be the most important factor of our entire story going forward. Alright, boys, we're whipping it out again. It's time for a part 2. Hi everyone, I'm back for the part 2 of the timelines. How long has it been? 2-3 months? It's been a while. I had a bunch of stuff going on and got a little delayed. I mean, as you've seen, the streams have not been that active, and then I'm starting to get back into it now that I'm all settled. I'm done with my busy shit. So now we're gonna be back to normal. Gonna be working on this. And we're gonna be making more of this shit, hopefully. As you heard in the intro, let's get this shit started. Let's start all the way at the very beginning. As you can see, there
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
are 3 timelines going on right now. Technically 4, if we'll get into that later. 5 if you count the Chaos storyline from Black Ops 4, but I don't really count it because it's dead. It's literally dead. So, in the beginning, as I said before, it was only the Keepers. All the way back at the beginning of creation, negative infinity BC, whatever you want to use your date and time and stuff. As I mentioned, the first one, he made the summoning key, and this would be used by the Keepers to manipulate all of the Aether, and they would in turn end up creating Agartha, which was the physical manifestation of the Aether. Which, yeah, I know it's a little confusing. How is that the physical manifestation of the Aether if the Aether encompasses all of creation and all of the universes? Because then wouldn't that already be a physical manifestation? I don't know. I didn't create this. I'm only retelling the story in a very abridged, condensed version. Hopefully not gonna make this 16 hours like other people have. But, so the Agartha in our world is seen in some religions and cultures known as, they don't know its true name, but they call it paradise, the house, heaven, etc, all that other crap that any religion will call heaven. But this place, Agartha, is completely separate from the Aether. Like, it's not part of this. It ain't here. You won't see, well, technically there's that in Agartha, but I'll not count that one. It doesn't make much sense if I include it. So the first one would use the summoning key to create life across all multiverses and all dimensions, basically God. So eventually with everything, they would find that there's polar opposites in nature and everything. So you have the Aether, you also have the Dark Aether, which was the complete opposite of the Aether, the opposite of creation, pure destruction, filled with only corruption and pure evil that would ruin any life it touches. Which in turn, some of the Keepers would see the dark and be like, ooh, do a little bit of trading. And they would eat that shit up. And then in turn, they would corrupt themselves and they would end up falling because of their curiosity and self-greed. So 2 of the main Keepers in the story, we'll call them Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man. I don't know if the Keepers have original names or not. They don't ever say it, so we'll just use that. So the Shadow Man, with all the Keepers that followed him to use a Dark Aether and everything, they would become corrupted and turn into these morphed Keepers, and they'll become known as the Apothecons, as I mentioned in the beginning. So the Apothecons wanted only to destroy all of the multiverse and all creation. They want pure destruction by any means necessary, no matter what. So the Apothecons would end up creating the Aether Pyramid, which would be a method for them to harvest Dark Aether, and they would use it to control the Aether. While the Apothecons were doing that, Dr. Monty, like I said, had been corrupted. However, he was able to resist most of its temptations, keyword most, and he ended up creating free will, which also partially makes him a god. With the growing dangers of Dark Aether, It led to Dr. Monty leading the uncorrupted keepers against the corrupted Apothicons in a battle that would become known as the War of Agartha. The results of this war would banish all the Apothicons to the Dark Aether, not before they hid a pyramid on Earth's moon back then, which is still pretty weird because it's the beginning of creation, but Earth's moon was made after stuff happened in creation. It's a little weird thinking about it scientifically. So they hid it there, and then the Keepers then swore to become the sole protectors of the multiverse against the Dark Aether. So then still going on back here in 1200s, I think it is now. So as time passed, the Apothicons would leak back out into the universe, and they would begin attacking humanity. So the Keepers came back, and they said, hey, let's help them out. So they fought alongside the humans to defeat them. And among those humans fighting were 4 of the greatest knights, and they were known as Dempsey, Belinsky, Miyazaki, and Richthofen. And each of them were armed with an elemental staff of fire, wind, lightning, and ice. So this battle would become known as the Great War, but it did not ultimately stop the Apothicons from spreading chaos to other dimensions. And their main way of doing this was to use a dark ether element called divinium, which would later be known as element 115, and spreading it across the universes in different parts of the worlds. And so because of the Great War and its result, and their meddling with the multiverse, this would end up leading to, we'll call it 3 split timelines. We'll get into the third one later, that will be the last one, but the main 2 we're going to focus on are the Ultimus universe and the Primus universe. So, our story begins in the year 1885. Also, as I put here, these don't run parallel to one another. I just wrote it like this to make it easier, because it would be convoluted if I would need a bigger whiteboard. I would need like double the size. Just a heads up. So we begin in 1885 in Purgatory Point. This is a old western town in the Midwest of America, cowboys and all that. So in Purgatory Point, we have Jebediah Brown and his mother who just moved to the town to make a new life. And about 30 years there, the miners in the town, they started finding this mysterious blue rock in the mine shafts. Ooh, my precious, what is this? So this blue mysterious rock would turn out to be element 115 that the Apothicons had thrown around the universe. It happened to be here in Purgatory Point. So a miner named Clive Farnsworth would be corrupted by the element 115, and he would turn into a zombie, and he would violently rip apart Jebediah's mother before he was killed by Jebediah. So Jebediah went out and he found more of element 115, and then he claimed to be visited by 2 angels, which turned out to be keepers. And so they instructed him to create a great machine that would be able to upgrade weapons for greater firepower. You could kind of guess what machine that is. No, that's not what fucking more. So eventually the Keepers came back and they instructed him once again, asking him to make an Agarthan device. This was made out of 3 components: an Apothecon's blood, an elemental shard that was bound with 4 souls in the ether, and the Vril vessel. Now it will get confusing. It's the Vril vessel, not the Vril device. Those are 2 different things. This would manifest one user's will into reality, aka like a one true wish, basically a genie in a bottle, if you will. But he was unable to fully construct it because he's like, what the fuck's an Apothicon, bro? I don't know what that is, and he didn't have the elemental shard. But he was able to create the vessel for them. So eventually, he started losing his mind, grieving for his mother. So he got a little crazy and decided, it's a Pack Punch machine. What if I shove a corpse in there? And then he did. And then it turns out his mother came back out of the machine, but she was just a ghost in the form of her younger self. And then after this, the final instruction from the Keepers was to take the Vril vessel and just slap that shit in. Slap that bad boy. Put that back in the Pack Punch machine. But this would end up dooming the entirety of Purgatory Point, because it would end up teleporting the entire town over to Angola, Africa. And it's quickly after the town would be overrun by zombies and left for over a century, but never being found. we go forward to the 1940s, to World War II, where a doctor named Ludwig Maxis rediscovers element 115, and he decides to create a scientific research group called 935 to study this element because we'll give humanity a better future with scientific breakthroughs. How will that work out? So one of the head doctors in this group was Edward Richthofen. He was a Nazi scientist that was part of the German army and a member of the Illuminati, working on their behalf. Yeah, and I don't know how this got involved, but yeah, the Illuminati's in the story. I don't know. But some of the other notable doctors that were there were Dr. H. Porter, Dr. Schuster, and Dr. Groff. There were also some other people involved, like Max's assistant and lover, Sophia, along with Max's daughter, Samantha. So their main base of operations would become known as the Dries facility, or the Giant in English. And eventually, the United States Office of Strategic Service, or the OSS, learned of this organization and was like, we can't have the Germans being all-powerful, you know. Let's send in 2 spies. Let's just do a little bit of Among Us. The 2 spies that the OSS would send in were Peter McCain and Dr. Harvey Yena to infiltrate the group. And at the same time, Japan was like, more element 115 in a random swamp in the middle of nowhere. What can we do with this? Do the exact same thing. Make the Rising Sun facility around the fucking meteorite that's here. And they would end up creating their own version of Group 935, which would be called Division 9. Real fucking original name. Jesus fucking Christ. You won like 2 letters off. Holy fuck. So eventually Group 935 would end up creating teleportation by testing it on corpses initially, where most of them would just disappear or disintegrate at first. But most times they would end up reanimating zombies, because you know it's using element 115. Of course it's going to reanimate zombies. That's the whole point. Max has continued to work with the zombies because he's like, I have an idea. What if we make a zombie super soldier army rather than teleportation? So Richthofen kept working on the teleportation with Dr. Schuster at the same time, while Max is being God, I guess you can call it. There's a lot of gods involved in this. As the funding ended up growing thin within the organization, Max was getting really desperate, so he decided, you know what? Them Nazis, them those guys, I think we can have some nice fun with them. And put it there. Can I even say Adolf's name? I said his name already. So he decided, we'll start making new weapons for these fun guys that are just definitely are not the bad guys, because we're Germans. The joke is that I don't like them. Nobody likes them. They're really bad. So they would end up making the Wunde, as the Germans say it, the Wunde weapons, and a bunch of Coca-Colas. So as Richthofen continued to work on teleportation, he decided, it's a good idea. Forget test subjects. Let's just use me.
Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity?
So he ended up getting in the teleporter and was like, you know what? Let's just go for it. So Dr. Schuster would end up teleporting him on the moon. Yeah, I know, pretty crazy. End up on the fucking moon in a cave where the Aether pyramid was. How he didn't immediately die because, you know, there's no oxygen there. Unless he went with an oxygen tank. Could have. He saw it and was like, I see a magical machine that I'd never seen before, and I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm gonna touch it. He got shocked by it. Not like that, often. He went like, ow, like, you know, like you rub a blanket or something, and you go, ow, it hurt, like that kind of electric shock. So then after that, he started hearing voices. We all know where this goes. So afterwards, he would be teleported to the Shangri-La, just Shangri-La, just the jungle temple in the Himalayas. And he would end up finding traces of 115 that were still there throughout the jungle. And there were a bunch of people there, the indigenous people and everything. And he was like, I'm a psychopath. I could use them to my advantage. So he's like, hey, look at this blue rock. Go get it. Go get a lot of it for me. Go do some digging. I'm sure nothing bad will happen. So, because he's like, oh, I'll give you modern technology in exchange for element 115, which... yeah, it ended up working. He got a shit ton. So while he was going around getting element 115 with the indigenous people and everything, he would end up finding the focusing stone. However, he could not use this yet. The word is yet. He will eventually. So he created a bunch of traps to protect it before anyone would try to steal it. Indigenous people, explorers, archaeologists, anything like that. So he ended up leaving Shangri-La, and the indigenous people would end up dying because, you know, Element 115, I think was gonna happen. Come on. So Richthofen ended up returning to Doris. I don't really know how. There's like a secret teleporter in Shangri-La, and they don't really show it anywhere. It just kind of happens. But so he gets teleported back to Doris, and he's like, Dr. Schuster, I was on the moon. So they began working on a moon base. Yeah, Americans didn't get there first because fuck you, teleportation. And meanwhile, this entire time, I guess Maxis didn't notice. I don't know. So this moon base ended up becoming Griffin Station, where they would just strictly study the pyramid and a bunch of other shit going on with that. While many of the scientists became disgruntled with Maxis, they just said, you know what, let's go Richthofen. Let's go on the moon. The moon's cool. I can bounce around. I can fly off and do a bunch of sick flips in the air. So eventually, once the station was completed, Richthofen would return back to Doris, and he would only be there as keeping up a fake for Maxis to be like, oh, there's nothing crazy going on. Not like I just took over his whole organization because you're a blown out psychopath trying to mess with zombies and all that. So while he was gone, he put Dr. Groff in charge of Griffin Station to study how the pyramid worked within the other dimensions. So Maxis continued working with the Nazis to get more funding, and then they began expanding their operations. This would end up leading to 5 of the facilities being made. There's a Kino facility, the Asylum facility, known as Verrucht, and then we ended up acquiring the Rising Sun facility because Division 9 didn't go anywhere. And then he would get the Siberian facility, known as Call of the Dead. And then the last one would be Eagle's Nest facility, which is Drop. So the Kino facility was an abandoned theater in Berlin that ended up being repurposed for Group 935. The Asylum facility, which is an asylum. Yeah. The Rising Sun facility was still the same. Shinonuma and everything. Swamp. That's it. And then the Siberian facility would be another place that Richthofen would use mainly for test subjects, captives, and a bunch of other shenanigans. So the last one, Eagle's Nest, is this castle in Austria in the mountains. So as Max continued working with Group 935, he was basically abandoning his daughter Samantha the whole time. And she was just staying at the Doris facility just because they didn't have a mother to take care of her or anything since she died during birth. And he would eventually give Samantha a nice little doggy named Fluffy. Look at her, so small. And then put her in my hand. Nothing bad will happen. Just kidding, he's not small at all. She's fucking pregnant. I don't know who gifts a dog with puppies. Unless you're gonna sell them. I mean, a little fucked up, but I'm not judging, I guess. You do you. So shortly after this, Maxis and Sophia would end up being transferred to the Kino facility, where they were pushed more towards making the undead army for the Nazis. So Maxis tried to brainwash the zombies to make them follow commands as soldiers by having them all sit down in the theater, strapped to chairs, and just watching movies, I guess, or own tapes he made. These tests ultimately failed, and it led to Sophia being infected by a zombie when one of them broke out and killed one of the guards and bit her. So the infection continued to spread through her body, but Max is, he's a fucking doctor, and he learned the attack. He's not stupid. So he decided, you know what? You want to be a robot? He's a robot now. That's it. She became known as the... I gotta read this. This is very long. Strategic Operations Planning Heroic Intelligence Analyzer? What is heroic? I don't even know. Heroistic? I didn't know that. I didn't know the full name before looking it up. That was a lot. So, while they continued working in the Kino facility, Samantha was sent with Richthofen to the Siberian facility. So at the same time, Group 935 ended up finding Purgatory Point in Africa, and they took all the research they had about the Agarthan device, and then Richthofen was like, a one genie in a bottle, I can use that. So this ended up becoming his backup plan in case anything went wrong, or if someone, say, failed to take over the universe and all. And he would end up using this as a way to reach Agartha if anything went wrong. In a Siberian facility, as I mentioned, he kept working on more human experimentations with 3 captured subjects. 3. Adam, 3. 3. Uno, dos, tres. So the first test subject was a Japanese officer known as Takeo Miyazaki. He was an honorable samurai and soldier who rose through the ranks of the Japanese army, and he quickly gained the attention of the emperor through jealousy. Not courage, not base things. Only jealousy. So during the war, he ended up being sent to the Rising Sun facility because he wanted them to basically monitor all the tests and basically be the overseer of everything. And he became so jealous at some point, the Emperor was like, you know what? Fuck this. Turn yourself in as a test subject. And he's like, okay. As a result of these experiments, Takio would literally only speak in, ooh, ancient Japanese proverb, do not stick dick in blender. So the second test subject would be a Russian soldier named Nikolai Blinsky. There are often many stories of Nikolai being a murderer, saying that he rose through the ranks just by killing competition, and he would just sleep his way with everyone, all the women and everything. But the truth was that he lost his first wife in a bombing when the Germans invaded Russia, and he decided to bury it and just forget it, and just became a crippling alcoholic. He was eventually captured in Stalingrad after his brother was killed trying to defend Red Square, so he became fully dependent on vodka after the testing because he was such a terrible alcoholic and they just kept using the element 115 on him. It would drive him insane practically. So the third test subject would be known as just the Mexican named Pablo Marinus. That's it. So from LA 115, he started going crazy. He kept seeing visions of both the past and the future of the Great War happening, all the way back in the beginning of time with the Keepers and the Apothicons, with the humans. So he kept picturing himself fighting alongside the Knights back then and the Keepers. He believed he needed to go back there somehow, like he was the key to everything, to saving the universe. He would end up being killed by Richthofen in the test because he's like, you know what's the key to the human mind and free will? Your spleen. Your spleen. Your spleen. But after this, Richthofen would end up needing a replacement, so he decided, hey, this is American Marine we got, let's get him. And this would be Tank Dempsey. So Tank Dempsey was actually captured by Group 935 when he was attempting to save Peter McCain after the asylum facility ended up falling apart and being overrun. But Peter McCain was never there because he already left. She tried going to the Rising Sun facility. So the mission to save Peter McCain was launched by Cornelius Purnell. His name will be important, just like 40 years later. I don't know why he only gets mentioned now. So the 4 Marines sent were Banana, Smokey, and Paxton Gunner Ridge. Yeah, I don't know why he has a full name compared to the other 2. So they were sent to rescue Peter after he'd been found out as a spy by Group 935, and he got captured before the zombie outbreak occurred. But during this outbreak, he managed to escape, but he also lost the arm of the Prophet because he got bit. So he's like... So when they arrived, they found that Peter was already gone, and the facility was completely overrun. And then Banana and Smokey would end up being killed, and Paxton managed to escape. And Paxton reported to Purnell saying, hey, fuck a failure, bro. And then Dempsey would end up being captured by Group 925 as one of the only 2 survivors. And because of the testing on Element 115, he would end up just being an idiot. Actually, no brain cells. Like, negative 100 IQ, practically. But he got pretty strong, though. He's a big boy. He's a big lad. And he's also determined as fuck. Strong wills. So, as the test continued on, Richthofen decided, you know what's better than a zombie army? Let's have a clone army of 3 of the most idiotic people I have working with me. So with the continuous failures, this didn't end up going anywhere. And because he didn't have any good results trying to unlock the human mind, so they would just end up having free will anyway, he decided to shift his focus back to the Agarthan device that he found out from Purgatory Point. So the first thing he needed was that elemental shard that they still didn't have. So to make the first part that he was missing, the elemental shard, he decided to siphon 3 of the souls from the test subjects, and then the 4th would end up being his own. But unbeknownst to him, this would in turn bound all 4 people across all dimensions, all timelines, the entirety of the multiverse. They'd be bound together forever. And then following Yina's discovery of Richthofen's personal projects, we'll call them, with the Agarthan device and trying to take over the world and everything, he would end up reporting these to Group 935, which would lead to the ending of all of these tests and everything, and in turn, the main 3 subjects would end up being put on cryogenic sleep. He would also have to give up the elemental shard to Division 9, and the entire mass production of the Wunderwaffe DG2, which was Richthofen's project of a wonder weapon, was cancelled. So he was forced to end up returning to Derice to work with Maxis. As he returned to Derice, meanwhile, Dr. Schuster and Dr. Groff were still working with the Pyramid back on the moon, and they've ended up finding out, yo, this thing takes souls. Because they ended up killing a rat. They were like, bang. They were playing BB. They were having a little fun, shooting rats, killing bitches, eating souls. So they found out the rat's soul got absorbed into the machine, and then they're like, let's send everyone up there. So Richtofen just ended up teleporting people to the moon, which would literally just be sacrifices to charge it. Whether or not the prisoners or not, I don't know who. I'm clear about who was sacrificed, but I can only imagine. So part of this plan for Richtofen, he wanted to end the entirety of Group 935. It's not what it was initially, where Maxis wanted to better humanity. Now it's just Maxis being a psychopath by focusing only on weapons for the Nazis. So he decided to arrange a deal between both the Americans and the Russians to split the scientists from the entirety of the group between the two countries. At least the ones not on the moon base anyway. So as Maxis continued to work on teleportation Richtofen, while not knowing it was already completed. Yeah, I know. A lot of little retcons here, because it's a little all over the place. But Richtofen had a plan to deal with both Maxis and Samantha. So the final test that Maxis was conducting was on Fluffy. And when Samantha saw it, she was like, yo, what the fuck, bro? What is this shit? What are you doing? What you doing, my dog? So she ended up trying to run into the chamber to stop it. Now this is where the Hellhounds come from, because Fluffy got teleported and turned immediately into a Hellhound. So as Samantha ran in, Maxis tried to stop her by running into the chamber with them, and Richtofen ended up closing the door on them, and all three of them got teleported around. Fluffy would just end up making more Hellhounds, I guess, with puppies. It's all we can think of Hellhounds. That's one. Samantha was actually ended up being sent to the moon, and she actually ran into the moon pyramid device. It's now called the MPD. And then at the same time, Maxis was actually sent to the crazy place, which was a place outside of space and time, but it's not the Agartha. Yeah, I know, it doesn't make any sense, because it was just like a gateway to it, I'm guessing. The doorstep, the stepping stones, you know? So he also developed the power to merge with electricity while he was in there. I don't know. I don't know. So after Maxis was in the crazy place, Dr. Schuster and Dr. Groff ended up teleporting him to Griffin Station to get Samantha out of the MPD, but Maxis was, a little cuckoo. He said, it'd be real funny if I blew my brains out in front of my daughter's face to make her real angry. So he instructed her, you know what, kill them all, bro. And then went bang in front of her fucking eyes. And he didn't actually die. He actually became a part of Griffin Station through the electricity. But now that Samantha was in the MPD, she basically controlled all of the zombies, all of the dark ether in the ether. And she sent them after the entirety of Group 935. She would end up destroying all the facilities. Dr. H. Porter gave the signal for all Group 935 scientists to either A, kill themselves, or B, to escape because of the outbreak and everything. And he would end up killing himself. Following the downfall of Group 935, Richtofen awakened the 3 test subjects. So now we're getting into the real meat of all the maps. Because we already had Verrucht with Dempsey. Now the real ones begin. Also, I should have mentioned Noct is canon, but nothing happens. They all died, the Marines anyway. So now, let's get started with the first map other than Verrucht. So now we get into the first map with our boys, our gracious boys, Richtofen and the crew. This group ended up becoming known as the Ultimates group, and their main plan was to defeat Samantha.
It was not Richtofen's plan, really. There was actually a lot more he was gonna do, but they don't know that.
Richtofen ended up taking the 3 test subjects to the Rising Sun facility, where they would find Peter McCain dead, attempting to parachute to meet the OSS there. And while they were at the Rising Sun facility, they also found Richtofen's diary, which had all of the information about the Aether, the Agartha, and everything that he needed for his plan. So, going forward, that's when the maps continue. So at this point, Richtofen's master plan was to use the real device, not the real vessel, the focusing stone, and the golden rod, the real generator. Yeah, I know. So his plan was to combine them, and he would swap souls with Samantha's body to end up taking over the universe and controlling all of the zombies and everything. After they would end up retrieving his diary at Shinonuma, they would end up going back to Derice. While they were there, Dempsey ended up firing the Wunderwaffe while they were in the teleporter, which would actually make them go forward in time. But while they teleported, Richtofen ended up dropping his diary back in Derice. So he didn't have his entire plan or anything that he needed. However, we'll get back to that group later, because there's a bunch of more stuff that happens in the 1950s and the 1960s, because they do not come back until 1963 with Kino. We'll just call this the in-between time travel. We'll call it that. So following that deal Richthofen made to distribute the scientists from Group 935, Dr. Yina would end up going to the Ascension group in Russia, and then Dr. Schuster would begin working on Area 115, also known as Groom Lake, for America. And they were both groups fighting for the, the space race, because what else would they be doing in the 1950s? But the real reason they wanted to go there was to get Griffin Station. It was not for, one small step for man, one tiny leap for mankind. So Yina ended up hiring 2 scientists, Anton Gersh and Yuri Zavotsky. So 2 of the projects they would mainly be working on were space travel and teleportation, using Richthofen's diary, which they managed to get from Darius. I don't know, the zombies just died, left. But eventually, they actually ended up getting a radio message from a Siberian facility, even though it had already fallen. And this message was from Pablo Marinus, who actually survived the surgery that Richthofen was trying to do with the spleen that got him killed initially. But he had woken back up in the facility where he was abandoned, and there were tons of zombies there, and he was strangely trapped in the area. He kept trying to leave multiple times, but he could never make it out. He was practically just destined to be there. But with his radio message, he told the Ascension group about the Agarthan device, and that he knew how to build it because of the visions that he was seeing about the Great War and his destiny to fight alongside the Knights. Gersh believed that they could use the Agarthan device, so they made an agreement to create the device in exchange for his rescue. Pablo ended up giving them the coordinates for the final piece that they still didn't have yet, which would be the blood of the Apothecons. Located deep in the ocean was a corpse at the location of an ancient Apothecon from the Great War that just didn't decay, it was just there. I don't know, man, it was there. However, Gersh tried to experiment with the blood rather than hand it over right away. Yeah, nice dickhead. Because it had unique properties that, as it says, was the negative space like a black hole. And so part of the Apothecon blood was actually used as injections on the space monkeys. Yeah, I know, little rats. Yeah, it's all Apothecon blood and running through them. That's why they throw grenades at you and they're psychopaths. And he ended up launching them into space as ways of testing. Oh, we can survive space because of the Apothecon blood. Yeah, it didn't really work, did it? So using this Apothecon blood, Gersh would end up making the Project Mercury, which also be known as the Gersh device, because the research with the negative space and generating black holes and everything, after Yuri nearly destroyed it, Yuri was removed from the project and it was pushed over to Rocket Division. But as Yuri kept reading through Richthofen's diary over and over again, he continued to be corrupted just by the exposure from it, and he kept hearing Samantha's voice in his head, pushing him more and more to complete the Gersh device, to use it for traveling between different rifts and dimensions and everything. He was instructed, again, by Samantha, to like, yo, see that Gersh device? Put it on right now. See Gersh? Do a little bit of trolling. Right at their feet. Tell him to press A to jump in, see what happens. So Gersh would end up being absorbed into the device. He was then instructed again by Samantha that, hey, you need to go in there. And so he ended up being actually transported to the Pentagon. But we'll get to that one later. So after everything just happened with the Ascension group, over back in Groom Lake, we have Major George Sawyer. Following the agreement, he hired the rest of the Group 935 people that didn't go to Ascension. So this became focused on the undead factor of Element 115. But Dr. Schuster was ultimately opposed to it due to what happened with Samantha and everything, experience with all the experimentation. So they would end up creating a teleportation device between both the Pentagon and Groom Lake. And while Sawyer kept pressuring him to create a link between Groom Lake and Griffin Station, he was worried that there was a bunch of problems with it. Potential time travel that might happen, or something else that might happen where he would end up in a different place, or maybe more zombies would happen, any kind of errors that would happen. So while this was going on with Sawyer and Dr. Schuster, there was another doctor named Dr. Lehman. He was put in charge of where Max is left off with the undead experiments, and soon after, he actually managed to make docile, obedient zombies using Element 115 by putting it into a gas form, and would become known as Nova 6. Campaign tie-ins? It only gets more confusing based on what I said about the timeline thing in the last video. So while he kept working on the experiments, Yina had sent him a copy of Richthofen's diary, which had also been corrupting a layman as well, and he kept being told by Samantha to create an obedient undead army. And during this time, Parnell has joined Groom Lake after the stuff with the OSS, and he's been working with Robert McNamara to create a new organization similar to Group 935 yet again, called Broken Arrow. And this project in the base would expand the research into Element 115 to follow Group 935's original plan of bettering the human condition, not just making weapons, zombies, and all this other garbage. And initially, this plan wasn't going anywhere because of the government's disinterest in it. Because who wants to better humanity? Who likes humanity? We like weapons. We like taxation. We love trolling the citizens. So he was speaking with Schuster about the Rising Sun facility and how Samantha had been responsible for the numerous zombie attacks on it. And he used all of the evidence that he had to actually prove to the government that she actually existed and she was gonna attack at some point or some other nonsense, which then led to funding towards the Broken Arrow project, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. So Broken Arrow was given a nuclear test facility, which would become known as Camp Edward, probably named after Richthofen, also known as, you know, sit down, yay, the zombies tired, yay. So they were convinced that Samantha would end up trying to wipe the entirety of humanity or the world off the map. And they were trying to make a method to destroy Samantha if she ever came back. But Parnell sought to harvest her power for himself due to, you know, they also corrupted by Element 115. Can you name one person who was not corrupted by Element 115? Jesus Christ. Alright, you like more, time travel shenanigans? Now we're in 1963, where we meet the Ultimus crew, who have now returned back to time after being pushed 20 years in the future at the Kino facility, where Samantha's like, yo, there they at, get them. So she launches another outbreak there, and Richthofen, while he's there, he ends up finding a spacesuit and a lunar lander. Don't know where the fuck it was. And then somehow takes it all the way from Berlin to the Ascension facility all the way in Russia. Yeah, I don't know. That's the in-lore explanation. Don't ask why. I don't know. This was before the good creator, Jason. Oh my god, what the fuck's his name? Jason Blundell. But this is before Jason Blundell, so it's a little all over the place. So then, following their successful survival of the outbreak, they would end up going to the Ascension facility, as I mentioned, and there they found all the corrupted scientists all turned into zombies, where Samantha launched yet another attack, and the monkeys and everything that were infused with this apothecon blood that escaped, and they would end up finding Richthofen's original journal, even though it's not in the Easter egg for some reason. And along the way, they were communicating with Gersh the whole time, who, because of the Gersh device, somehow was not a, as I put it, not a part of this physical realm. Not really sure what that means, but let's go with it. So the crew would end up helping Gersh, being freed and everything, and they would end up also being sucked in by a Gersh device, but I guess they get to keep their bodies and everything. I don't fucking know. They're actually transported yet again all the way to the future. Yay. So they get put forward to, I don't think I have an exact year for it. I think it's like 2004. But I know it's somewhere in the 2000s it's happening, where movie director George Romero, may he rest in peace, has uncovered various documents from Group 935 about all their experimentation with zombies, teleportation, and everything. And he's like, you know what? I'm gonna make the best zombie movie of all time at the Siberian facility, starring Sarah Michelle Gellar, Robert Englund, Danny Trejo, Michael Rooker. I like them. They're good actors. So they were filming there at the same time Ultimus had arrived there in the future, and in turn will lead to yet another outbreak. Ooh, shocker. Ooh. So following this, Richthofen will end up convincing all the actors to help him get the real device, which was still at the Siberian facility, and you're gonna just leave him to die. They would just teleport out of there and be like, bye. And in turn, the entire production team ended up dying without leaving a trace. And then they ended up time traveling yet again, but before they teleported, some little small stuff happened in the sidelines. This would lead to George's assistant named Sally start studying all the research he had and everything, and find out where the fuck did they all just go. Like, what the fuck? Somehow this led to her getting to Shangri-La. I still don't understand how that happened, but she found out that at Shangri-La, there were two explorers named Brock and Gary. So Brock and Gary were two explorers trying to find any kind of evidence that Arthur was real and some means of way to access it. They would end up being trapped in the time loop because an eclipse began when they tried getting the focusing stone. They found out each time they died or they find the focusing stone, they were just sent back to the beginning and just repeated over and over again. Now we're going back to 1953 while they're still there. Brock and Gary are still there at the same time. They start instructing them like, hey, we need you guys to get through these various traps that we have in Shangri-La because they need to get the focusing stone for themselves. Would in turn, Brock and Gary would end up dying every single time, and they would just never remember what would happen. So then, after they get the focusing stone and everything, the crew would try to teleport to the moon to Griffin Station, but Dempsey does the same thing he did in Doris, where he shot the baby gun in the teleporter in Shangri-La, and this would end up sending him a little bit into the future, about only 10 years. They would send him to the Pentagon, where... Wait a minute. So you may have noticed I did change the writing a little bit on the 1963 and everything, because I realized they were a lot closer than I thought. I thought they were further off, and I was wrong. They were supposed to go forward in time to 2025, where Moon happens, but ended up getting pushed back in time in the Pentagon in 1963 and classified not 5. In 1963, Dr. Lehman actually released the Nova gas into the entirety of the 5 facility during classified. This is when Yuri arrives from the Gersh device that he went through previously, and he releases the entire undead army upon the facility and the crew. But then Samantha instructs him, no, you're not gonna be here. We don't get good boss enemies in Black Ops 4. You have to go back to the good game, Black Ops 1, and go fight the crew in 5. Which turns out to be just the next day. Yeah, pretty weird. It might be a few days. It's not clear in the timeline, because it's implied it's the next day, which doesn't make any sense, but it's also implied that this happens somewhere between November 2nd to the 6th, and this happens on November 6th. It doesn't make any sense. As the crew fights the outbreak, they keep taking the teleporter to Groom Lake, like back and forth, as you know on the map. It's basically where Pack-a-Punch is. So at some point while they're doing that, they see the teleporter to Moon, and they decide, you know what, let's take it. Let's go to the Moon to finish this plan. So they go to the Moon. However, they ended up going to 2025. You can see here, because the moon on Earth and the moon in Moon is actually 2 different times completely. Pretty wacky. So now on the Moon in 2025, Richtofen enacts his master plan to swap souls with Samantha and control the zombies. And he ends up opening the MPD to swap bodies, and then at the same time, Max actually intervenes in the facility, and he convinces the other 3 crew members to sever his connection with all the zombies, but in turn, this would just end up blowing the Earth by launching 3 giga nukes at it, like massive nukes. For a time being, that's where it ended. In Black Ops 1, that's where it ends. However, as I said before, they jumped a whole 62 years from Moon to Moon to the Moon. You know what I mean? So, there's a little bit of stuff that happens in the 1970s. I gotta go over it. Tiny bit. So, between the time jump of 1963 and 2025, at the same time, 5 happens. As I mentioned before, it happens a few days after, because somehow this outbreak got contained, and then they cleaned it up, and then had the meeting, and then after that, another outbreak happened. Yeah, it's 2 different outbreaks. It's not the same one. It's two different ones, like 3 days apart. I don't know. As we know in 5, you got John F. Kennedy, Robert McNamara, Robert McNamara, Richard Nixon, and Fidel Castro all fighting zombies after they met to settle the whole Cuban Missile Crisis and everything. This attack with Yuri, though, however, would just end up failing, where they would all survive the ordeal and actually end up capturing Yuri, and they sent him to Camp Edward. But while this is going on over in the Pentagon, over at Camp Edward, Parnell has been conducting more experiments with the elemental shard that they have, because they took it from Division 9 following its downfall, you know, Group 935 and everything. And he worked with another doctor named Dr. Hale, and they worked on testing it further and using its immense power to create the advanced automated machines, or atoms. They use both AD from the word advanced, which is pretty weird. Usually you have another word in there, but whatever. These robots would end up being used to serve the facility and everything, although there's like things, people saying, ooh, it's weird, they're like alive in the facility because it gives them souls with the shard, which is pretty fucking creepy if you think about it, because if you actually play the map, there are some times, if you like kind of glance away and glance back, they do look at you. They actually look at you, fucking freaky. So then Purnell ended up sending Paxton to the Rising Sun facility because he wanted him to recover Peter McCain's body, because he wanted to use it as a test subject, because he wanted to see if can I revive someone who's been dead for like 20 years, which doesn't really, actually 30 years, because this is going on in 1970s approximately, or 60s, we don't know. So then they ended up actually successfully reviving Peter McCain, which is pretty crazy. And after this, the Department of Defense actually came and took the elemental shard for other broken arrow experiments that they wanted to conduct. Not before Purnell actually broke a part of it. He broke it like in half. And as Purnell's corruption continued to grow, he began to hear more and more of the voices going on, ooh, and they were telling him to actually reach the Aether through the MPD. And instead of traveling to the moon for it, Broken Arrow actually completely remade the MPD, calling it the American Pyramid Device. Yeah, I know, we're fucking original, am I right? And it was nearly identical to the MPD, except it couldn't tap into the Aether the same way, because, you know, it's just made by machines, not made by ancient mythical beings. So while the APD could not actually be used to tap into the Aether, it was very useful at interrogating people because it actually had the ability to piece into people's minds. And it would end up using this a ton on Yuri non-stop to learn more about Samantha and what she was planning for her next attack or anything. But this would inevitably kill him, as they literally make him nothing but bones by the end of it. So following this, Purnell decided, you know what? I'm just gonna have a little bit of the Ascension going on. Not that map. I'm gonna send myself to reach the Aether and Agartha, because that's how this definitely works. So his means of ascending himself would just be constant exposure to element 115, testing on himself, all kinds of experimentation using the APD along with Dr. Hale, who's kind of a lover at this point, sort of, not really, I don't know. Can't really tell, but they keep working on it. But eventually, Peter actually betrays Purnell and starts reporting it to the Department of Defense of all this crazy experimentation that's going on. So Purnell would actually learn of Peter's betrayal and ended up having him imprisoned. But as Purnell and Hale were conducting the final experiment on him, George Sawyer actually arrived at Camp Edward to arrest them while Purnell was inside the APD. But this was the final test with all the maximum exposure that he actually had been transformed into pure energy as the Avogadro. Yeah, that's him. That entire time has been him. And he ended up killing everyone at the camp through electricity, leaking Nova 6 everywhere. But somehow during the fight with the army and the Avogadro, they managed to force him back into the APD. A little bit of lazy running. And they set up a nuclear failsafe near the facility if he ever managed to escape or anything happened. But yeah, while this was happening at Camp Edward, the remainder of the Ascension group with Yina was still working somehow, despite, you know, the Ascension facility falling and everything. Another moment of Black Ops 4 shitty writing, but Yina actually didn't end up going through with their promise to Pablo to deliver the Apothecon blood for him to leave and everything. And they planned to arrive to the facility by boat. But eventually, at some point, the blood actually broke free, ended up killing the entire crew, and it would end up leaving Pablo abandoned with no way to receive the blood. And he would just be left to die, unfortunately. But following on this, Broken Arrow would continue on with different projects, creating new facilities in Shanghai, China, Hangford, Washington, also known as Transit. And two of the people that were involved in this were Russman, just known as Russman, Agent Russman, and George Barkley, where they were actually sent to Camp Edward to recover a piece of the Avogadro as a means of infinite power. And as they arrived, they decided to send the Avogadro to the Hanford facility using the APD, while they looked for the other half of the elemental shard, but they never ended up finding it. They then return to the Broken Air facility where they actually been using the elemental shard as a mean to make animals into mutated bioweapons. And one of these facilities that Russman was working at ended up being overrun, and it would completely destroy Broken Arrow after that. It would lead to the entire collapse of the organization. Russman would end up losing his memories from the corruption he was getting from the shard and everything, and he would ultimately be removed from the organization. Alright, well, we're back at it, back at recording, and as you can tell, it's probably been a few weeks, or maybe a month, depending on when this goes up. You guys fucking have a whole beard going on here compared to last time where I was just freshly shaven like a day or two before. So if things look a little inconsistent, well, you know why? Because it's been a while. I mean, I'm wearing not exactly the same outfit. I wanted to keep it somewhat consistent. Some articles of clothing are kind of different.
Oh my god, those dogs are barking!
Getting back to it, after the destruction of the world in 2025, now jumping back to post-Moon, when we were a little bit earlier in the 1970s with the comics going on with Russman and everything. During this time, the world's completely destroyed, and it's been swarmed with zombies, thanks to Richtofen. And the entire time, humans have been struggling to survive, because, you know, how you fucking gonna do it when the world's in 3 pieces? At least I believe it's in 3 pieces. Like in the Black Ops 2, man, you kind of see it's like big giant cracks going around it. During this time, Maxis and Richtofen have been competing with the survivors, trying to get them to work for them and everything, because they want to control, you know, the Earth and the Aether and everything. So they keep trying to convince them to do all their bidding and everything, and this leads to survivors being split between a group following Maxis and a group following Richtofen. The thing is, Maxis can only speak to people through electricity and like radios and things or whatever. But then Richtofen can only communicate to people who've actually eaten the flesh of zombies, because they've been influenced by element 115 and they kind of ingested and everything. So these people actually became a group known as the Flesh, and they've all become connected to the Aether and Richtofen. And this would further have the Earth go into turmoil as these factions keep fighting back and forth nonstop. So then we jump about 10 years forward after this. The world's still in shambles, but then from the ashes, as they say, a new group comes together, and they will become known as Victis. So the first member of this group, his name is Marlton Johnson. He actually traveled to Camp Edward to investigate the Atom units a while back after Russman and his other agent left. And this coincidentally, at least in the original timeline, that's what sets off the nuke in Nuketown Zombies. If you look at the canon, you can actually hear Marlton speaking if you ever walk up to the bunker he's in there. So yeah, basically him going there, setting off that nuke, it sends a distress signal to the CIA and the CDC to go there, and obviously fail to rescue him because you've all played Nuketown Zombies, even though it's mid. You know what happens. You fucking, they all die. And also, yeah, the Maxis blew up the Earth like 5 seconds after. Somehow Marlton survived that, yeah, don't ask. So then the second member of the group is a farm girl with a, oh my gosh, you got that giant glorious rack. Oh my god, brother. Oh, before they nerfed it in Black Ops 4.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
Praise be. We miss him. And her name is Abigail Misty Briarton. And her mother died previously, sometime before the zombies. I guess they hint at. They don't really give an explanation. And her father died fighting zombies at some point. So she went off on her own. And then the third member is actually a member of the Flesh group I talked about. His name is Samuel J. Stuhlinger. He keeps his past hidden for the most part with the group and everything. And the final member is Russman that we talked about earlier. Now homeless and basically senile because he's like 7 years old at this point and completely exposed to element 115. So while surviving, Marlton and Misty actually met up together in Hanford. And they kind of had sex together. Maybe? I guess that's how it goes. The big titty ones, they like nerds, I guess. So while they're there, they run into Russman and Stuhlinger, who have the bus from transit and everything, and they're using it to move around. And at this time, Maxis and Richtofen are starting to reach out to this group primarily to do their bidding. But the canon ending says that they follow Maxis the whole way. So they set out the polarization devices, So they do the first one in Hanford, the one random like spire pylon thing in the middle of the farm. Oh, is it the farm? Yeah, the corn area, that whatever that is. And I never did the Easter egg, so I don't know totally. But then after this, even if you do the max ending, which is weird, Richthofen then teleports you to an old broken arrow facility in Shanghai, China. And they do the second polarization device. Not much else happens here, really. And also, this is where they kind of sort of introduce a time loop that's going on, but it only happens in this map, so I don't know. It kind of doesn't get brought up again. Black Ops 2 is not right with Victis crew because they had the not Jason Blundell working on the other guy, and then he came back for 4. So it shows. I'm just saying. Anyways, so they find out that in Dire Eyes, if you die, you just come back and just get respawned, and for some reason only Stuhlinger remembers it, no one else. And so after that, they don't even get teleported. They have to like walk all the way from China to fucking Africa. I don't know how they do that. That would take like a month, I would imagine, just walking. Because they go to Africa. They go to Angola, Africa, where Purgatory Point is again, and then that's where we get buried. Haha, get it? It's buried in the ground. So they go there and they set up the final polarization device, and they get the help from a mysterious giant, and his name is Arthur. We'll get into him a little bit later. So eventually, once they finish the final polarization device, Maxis would then return Samantha's soul to her body, and then Richthofen's soul would be taken and thrown into a random zombified corpse, although it's implied it goes to the zombified Richthofen, but we'll get to that in the comics, because it still show up again. So he ends up leaving the Victis crew, and he says, "Bye-bye, you won't go die now." He says the same thing to the Ultimates crew back on Moon. "Bye-bye, bye. Death come for you." So because they're stuck with just a comatose body of Richthofen, so it's just 3 of them instead of the 4th. So following this, the Ultimates crew would eventually get on the original teleporter that brought them there, and then they would use it, but instead of going back to, Earth in 2035, 25, whatever the fuck they're in, they actually get transported back to 1963, where at the same time, their past selves are here in Classified as well. It gets a little confusing, because, Classified's in Black Ops 4, so it is canon, I will say that. So, like, if you're in Classified, you go to the Pack-a-Punch area, you sometimes hear them actually speaking off the map, which is very fucking weird for those who don't understand. So then Max sends Samantha to the Agartha, and he recognizes his corruption. He comes into contact with Dr. Monty. That version of Max's actually gets wiped away from existence by Dr. Monty. Oh boy, so this is when we get into the confusing stuff with the multiverse. Alright, so we get over here. We are now entering Dimension 63, also known as the Primus universe, I'm going to call it. So after Samantha was sent to the Agartha, a rift into a new dimension is created where the Great War is taking place, and Element 115 is left all throughout northern France. So in this dimension, Group 935 does exist with Maxis and Richthofen, although it's like 20 years before. It's like the 1910s, World War I, that area, rather than World War II, like this dimension. So these versions of Maxis and Richthofen are actually pure. They're more, we'll call them wholesome for now, because I don't know what else to call them. So they're not like evil, they're not well, I mean, Richthofen might be still a little bit of a sociopath, can't really tell, but they're not corrupted, I'll say that. They're not corrupted. They're not doing this for weapons, they're just doing it for ending the war, I guess, which may be more noble in World War I. So they keep digging up and researching Element 115. This would then lead to Max actually creating replicas of those original elemental staffs back in the Great War. And he would look into making portals between space and time. Why not? The big jump there, Maxis, but whatever. So he starts hearing voices from Samantha claiming to be his daughter, but Samantha doesn't exist yet in the Primus dimension. He doesn't have a daughter, he doesn't have a wife, he doesn't have any of that. So as the research continues, the workers at the dig site start getting corrupted by Element 115 as well. They're not turning into zombies per se, but they are getting a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, as they say. And eventually they would end up making those giant robots. Frida... Zeus is Greek, not Norse. Odin's the equivalent. And then there's Thor. And then there's a 4th one, but we didn't talk about the 4th one. So then eventually the knights would awaken, you know, the ones from the Great War, not the main four, but like the Protector Knights, all of them. They are awakened and they decimate the facility. They kill them all. They snacky of all of them and turn them into zombies, you know. Richthofen sought to preserve Max's brain following this because I think he got bit or he got infected somehow, I don't know. Or he was in some kind of comatose state, they said. As the facility is collapsing, 3 spies were actually sent there to find Richthofen and any research they had of Element 115. And coincidentally enough, those 3 spies are also Dempsey, Nikolai, and Takio, similar to the original dimension, the same 4 people. Now, again, these still are pure versions because, you know, they haven't been tested on, they haven't been corrupted in any way. These 4 end up forming the Primus crew, with all 4 of them fighting back the zombies in Origins and everything. So while they're fighting, Samantha begins speaking to the 3 of them specifically, because Richthofen doesn't know about that shit. So they start talking to the 3, be like, hey, I need help, please help me. And she starts relaying the steps to open the gateway to Agartha. So eventually, they do open the gateway, you know, the Easter egg has to happen. So they take Max's brain, they put it in the Max's drone, and they send him through the Agartha gateway to go meet Dr. Monty in the house. And in this house, Dr. Monty gave Max's a brand new body, and then cleansed Samantha's soul of anything from the dark ether before bringing her to the house as well. Now, I will say, it's kind of weird what happens after that with the main 4. Like, I'll explain what happens to Richthofen, but the other 3, they just kind of go back home. I don't know how you go back home if they're opening the gateway to entirely new dimensions and basically paradise in your realm. Maxis began working on making a teleporter in the house to explore all these different dimensions and everything, and he ended up discovering a new dimension called Empty Earth. And basically, this is where another Maxis at some point was collecting and recreating all artifacts throughout all timelines, all maps. Basically, he's recreating like the summoning key, the elemental staffs, fucking Ted from Transit for some reason. It's in the comics, you see it. So the dimension eventually started falling apart, I guess because of all these artifacts. It just kind of happens. I don't know why. They didn't really explain. This dimension had a base in it called Zero Base, which is where all the artifacts were stored, including one very important one called the Chronorium. So this book contains the entirety of the multiverse, past, present, and future, as in how everything will happen, how things have happened, everything. However, though, this base is only accessible to beings that have souls, which is very important to mention now. This was basically the biggest means of protection because I guess, I don't know, keepers don't have souls, or I don't know what dictates what does and doesn't have a soul, because zombies obviously don't have souls, or whatever. So Dr. Monty then tells Maxis he wants to create a reality where there's no apothecons at all. They do not exist, but they need the summoning key to do that. And Maxis tells Richthofen about the Chronorium to use it to find the summoning key and make the entire multiverse, free of zombies. Alright, so we're getting to the peak. We're getting to Mob of the Dead in 1933 about. So this is about a decade in the future, approximately. We're in Dimension 63, where Salvador DeLuca, Billy Handsome, Michael Finn O'Leary, and Albert the Weasel Arlington, they began working together in the DeLuca crime family. Eventually, this would all fall apart, and they would all end up being sent to Alcatraz prison in 1933. As Richthofen is traveling through all dimensions, his blood is actually becoming more concentrated with the Aether and Element 115, and his blood could be used by the Shadow Man to harvest, consume it, and they could create a portal to free the Apothecons from the Dark Aether. So Richthofen does eventually convince the Warden and the Illuminati to build a secret lab for him there on the island, over like in the corner somewhere. You'll see it later. And he fills his lab with cryo chambers, which will be important later. It's a surprise tool. This happens a lot in this fucking series. A lot of foreshadowing, I guess you can say. But at the same time, the Shadow Man also convinced the Warden to do his own bidding to create the pocket dimension to trap Richthofen and harvest his blood. He was ordered to kill the 4 mobsters and create a dimension. Meanwhile, the Weasel planned to create a plane for the mobsters and to escape the prison. but it ultimately failed because they started doing infighting, blaming one another, and I think the plan just fell apart in general when they tried it. I don't know if they ever. That's the one thing, they don't ever say if they tried it or not, but there was never a plain win. So coincidentally enough, the three mobsters, Sal, Billy, and Michael, they all end up killing the Weasel, and this is basically the Warden's prime time to be like, I have a response to that. So he sentences all of them to death by electric chair, and then he would also follow suit as part of the final act for him to do with for the Shadow Man or whatever. Basically, he needs to be there in the pocket dimension. Basically, the four mobsters are put into an infinite cycle, attempting the same escape attempt, where they get the keys to leave, but then the plan fails, so they are doomed to just constantly fail over and over again. And they keep fighting back zombies. We're gonna fail. It's the infinite cycle. The only one that remembers anything during these cycles, however, is the Weasel. He retains a little bit of his memory as he keeps going. Basically, in every case, they complete the cycle. They could actually get to escape and everything, but they get stopped, where they are forced to do the cycle again because, you know, you get to the bridge at the end of the Easter egg, you kill Weasel, it just keeps going over and over again. And in the Easter egg, you see as well, there is a way to actually break the cycle by having the Weasel kill the other three mobsters. And we'll get into this later. This is very important later. We'll talk about it. Now we get into the comics, which honestly I didn't know they were canon at first. When I was I was in high school when those shits came out. I thought they were just a little fun thing, like, oh, a little bonus content. Look at the Victis crew, and then they're gonna die. And then Black Ops 3 happened. I was like, oh. So in the meantime, while Rick Thomas is traveling around the dimensions, he started hearing a voice speaking to him. And this voice was actually Stuhlinger from the Victis crew. Somehow he's able to talk to Richtofen in other dimensions as well. Little weird. And basically, the Victis crew, they are the last four humans in that Earth, in the Ultimus universe. Victis was then teleported around throughout the comics, going to many different towns. They get different parts. Most of them aren't really important except for two, where they go to the broken air facility where Russman used to work at, the one I talked about that got destroyed and everything, and they recover the half of the elemental shard that was taken away from Camp Edward and everything. The second one they go to is Empty Earth. So in Empty Earth, you know, they still have souls. They haven't had their souls taken or anything, so they go in and they try hanging out there for a little bit because, oh my god, look, it's a peaceful place, no zombies or anything, and they haven't had a break in probably like 10 plus years, 15, I don't know how long. But eventually they do find the Chronorium, and they take the Chronorium, they travel once again, and when they scan their blood, basically to see if they have souls, it takes out like a little vial of their blood, and it puts them into another machine, which would eventually later be taken by Zombie Richtofen, who manages to get into Empty Earth and the Zero Base. See, he has a soul. You don't need to be a human to be a soul. So in the meantime, while the Zombie Richtofen goes there and gets the blood, Victis is also teleported to Richtofen's lab in Alcatraz. During this time, Primus Richtofen then meets with the Zombie Richtofen in Empty Earth, getting the blood vials from him of Victis, and in exchange for that, he sends the Zombie Richtofen back to 1963, he's getting all over the place, to the Ultimus crew that's, you know, captured there, and he places his soul back into that regular body before the zombified corpse just disappears. Richtofen goes around, he starts getting up loose ends in some things. He gets the blood vials of the mobsters in Alcatraz, and he takes Sal and Finn's blood, and he gives it to another version of himself in the past. Then he goes back to Alcatraz. The Victis crew, now in Richtofen's lab in Alcatraz, that's where he tells them all about what the Chronorium is and everything. And he tells them, hey, I need you to live, so get in these cryo chambers. If you please, brother. Please. And then that's when a future version of Richtofen actually arrives with the whole Primus crew to take their remaining blood vials. This version will also be relevant later. We'll get into it, because fucking hell, there's a lot of shit going on. Alright, so this next section is gonna be really fucking weird because I was not aware of how much lore actually happens within Shadows of Evil. I kind of thought it was like they get the summoning key and stuff. There's way more happening in the background. Like, let's start from the very beginning. So at some point, the Shadow Man just leaves the Dark Aether after speaking with the Warden in Alcatraz. I don't know. I guess maybe the kills got him out or something. And he, goes around Dimension 63 doing a little bit of trolling because he keeps looking around for some ancient artifacts, including the summoning key, the most important thing we're going to need. And he ended up actually disguising himself as a human named Tony Hale Rapt. So we hired this guy just named the Reporter. We don't have a real name for him. That's what we're going to call him. So he finds all the artifacts for the Shadow Man, but each of the artifacts is actually sealed with an ancient magic in the boxes. It's like weird apothecon keeper nonsense going on. So multiple versions of the Reporter were supposedly hired by the Shadow Man because there's a version in Ultimus that goes there, but then there's also a version in Primus, the Primus universe that goes there. But okay, I can't really tell. It's kind of just a throwaway, this guy, but apparently he's important, so we gotta talk about him. Alright, so the Reporter in Dimension 63 is the one that actually gets the summoning key, again, locked in the box, we all know, because we've all played the map, I'm assuming, because, it's pretty fucking good, bro. And the other version, the Ultimus universe, he actually goes and tries to get the Vril vessel from the Siberian facility, but he ends up being captured by Ultimus Richthofen and supposedly killed, I'm guessing. So, go back to the one in Dimension 63, this one actually does end up going to Alcatraz, and he reports to the Shadow Man of what happened with the Warden, how he successfully created the pocket dimension. And then following this, he takes all the artifacts and he ends up going to Morgue City, where Shadows of Evil takes place. When he arrives there, he is ordered to investigate 4 individuals. So the 4 individuals is Nero Blackstone, Jessica Rose, Jackie Vincent, and Floyd Campbell. So each of these people, they have some means of like corrupted or like crooked thing that they've done to get in their career or like get money and stuff or whatever. At the same time, the Shadow Man is like messing around with them a little bit, trying to delve into their careers or whatever to basically almost expose them, like to get them on edge, sort of. But then it turns out each one of them missed one phone call from an important person in their life, which would have stopped them from, this whole Shadows of Evil stuff happening, which is pretty fucking wild, actually. So, like, there's Jessica Rose, who they know there's images of her out there doing a what's called just not safe for work, because we're on YouTube, we can't say such things. So, that almost gets exposed, but actually her director, who is talking to another fake version of the Shadow Man, disguising to, mess around, trying to do a little bit trolling. She the director calls her saying like, oh, I'm not gonna do anything with that guy. You're all good, baby. You won't be messed up or anything. But because they never received like that last phone call, each one of them freaks out and ends up killing someone. Which that's as we learned in Mob of the Dead, that's what ends up making this corrupted pocket dimension or corrupted realm world, whatever the hell's going on. This makes them all marked by the Shadow Man, and I'll go through each one they kill. So Nero ends up killing his wife to get insurance money because of her debt. It's just going up. Yeah, that's a cue for the joke in the lab. It's a joke. Please, it's post International Women's Day. It's fine. It's Mario Day. We're talking about Mario here. So then Jessica ends up killing that photographer who took the not safe for work blackmail and everything. And then Jackie Vincent actually kills his informant to tie up any loose ends with the police work because he's a very corrupt cop, basically. And then Floyd Campbell actually ended up killing his way to the boxing championship, basically just getting rid of the competition entirely. Oh, fuck. So at the same time, Dr. Monty finds out about everything the Shadow Man's doing, so he ends up going to the Reporter and warns him like, hey, fucking stop. He tells him don't give him any of the artifacts, don't give anyone anything, don't mess around with this shit. But eventually, Primus Richthofen actually ends up going to Morgue City, and he speaks with the Reporter, trying to convince him once again, like, hey, you should give it to me instead, don't worry about it, give me the summoning key and stuff. But eventually the Reporter refuses, and he ends up attacking Richthofen before he ends up getting killed by Richthofen, because, self-defense and all that fancy stuff. But the artifacts end up being lost in the city because nobody knows where they are. So like I said before, the Shadow Man ends up doing the big trolling again. It makes another alternate reality or pocket dimension or whatever with all 4 of the individuals that I mentioned, and they're cursed to basically become these apothecon-like creatures, I'll call them. They just call it the Beast, I guess. He acts as an ally for them, saying like, oh, if you sacrifice these most important people in your life, the closest ones to you, you will be saved. You must sacrifice everyone. As we know, that didn't work, and just releases the apothecon from the dark ether into the dimension and gives him the summoning key, because yay. So then after this, they end up working with the Keepers to actually contain the apothecons and the Shadow Man, and they do indeed succeed. Now, the summoning key, they use it to actually trap the Shadow Man inside and everything, but at the same time, now it's Richtoven's turn to do a little bit of fucking trolling. He just shows up and he steals the summoning key, claiming he has a universe to set right.
Bye.
And going forward, Dimension 63, it just collapses. It just dies the rest of the apothecons, basically. Or that pocket dimension does. We don't know what happens afterwards. There's nothing else that happens there, so oh well. This section is gonna be long one. It's the entirety of Black Ops 3, and that is a fucking doozy. Richtofen, following the collapse of Shadows of Evil and the whole Dimension 63, he begins following Dr. Monty's plan to create a perfect multiverse universe, whatever you want to call it. And the reward for it would basically be his soul living in the house with the rest of the crew. You know, Dempsey, Nikolai, Takio, Samantha, Maxis. They would all be living there with him. So the step 1, or step 0, I'll call it step 0 because we didn't get into anything else yet. He would go to find his soul in dimension 2210, completely random dimension where he's still a kid in this dimension. You know, he's a little kid, like lonely, because I think canonically he's an orphan. And eventually he ends up tricking himself to go into the woods, basically alone, and he ends up killing him and stealing his soul. This is the soul that ends up being reborn as a child, you know, in the house alongside Samantha that we see at the end of the Origins Easter egg. So basically it's weird because that's the first time you see Primus Richtofen, but he does that before. We're getting time jumps again weird. I just know that. So eventually, he does return back to the rest of the Primus crew, and he takes them all to go find the souls that they need for the whole crew and everything. The entire time, though, they are very untrustworthy of him, because he doesn't fill them in about all the dimensional travel he's been doing the entire time. I'm pretty sure, canonically, it's been like 2 years after Origins or something, and they're all like, yo, where you been? What the fuck? Like, what happened? So Richtofen's goal with the Primus crew and following Dr. Monty's plan is to actually create a paradox within the original timeline as a means for them to go around and harvest each soul without actually affecting the course of history in the Ultimus timeline or the Primus timeline or anything like that, as it's needed for all the other timelines to exist. You know, if you watch Back to the Future, this is where we insert the photo of Doc going like, create the original timeline, but when you fracture the back, you make a new timeline. Wait, this is I'm literally him. I'm him. I'm doing the same thing. This paradox begins when they actually go to Doris minutes after Ultimus Richtofen sends Maxis and Samantha through the teleporter and everything. That's where the 3 crew comes out. They're like, hey, yo, Richtofen, don't open that. Don't open that teleporter. That'd be a little bit of trolling if you did that. And then he does the trolling, and then he dies. I remember back when that happened, though, I was doing so much speculation with that, like how it was planned by, like, Ultimus was in on it, which kind of was, I guess. This is what causes the first fracture within the timeline. Also, by the way, when he goes in that cutscene and takes Ultimus's soul, no, he doesn't. It's a fucking sham, bro. This is when we get down here to the corner, where we get to the fractured universe, the alternate universe. This is when the giant happens in 1945. Instead of Doris, it's now the giant, because we like English in this household. The first fracture, that's when it's called the Discipio fracture. So this is where Dr. Groff actually takes control of Group 935 following Richtofen's death, because he's, I guess, the next higher up now that both Maxis and Richtofen are gone. And he plans to take Ultimus Dempsey's body to the moon, still in cryosleep, to do more testing and everything. So Primus ends up taking one of the robotic giants from Doris. Yeah, I guess a little confusing there because they're in the Ultimus dimension, but somehow they're still in the Ultimus dimension, but an alternate version where they have the robots now. We'll call that a retcon, I guess. So they take one of the giant robots and they travel to Eagle's Nest facility, which is known as Der Eisendrache, or the Iron Dragon, over in the Austrian mountains, I believe. I don't think they give a town or like the city specific name. I know it's somewhere in Austria. Dr. Groff attempts to stop them from collecting his body. Ultimately fails as the crew ends up launching V2 rockets at the moon facility and destroys the entirety of Griffin Station. And they send Dempsey's body back to Darius and Drock so they can harvest his soul. This is when Richthofen actually reveals the true objective of everything to the rest of the crew when he talks about how these souls are going to damn the entirety of the multiverse and everything. He's about to kill Dempsey, his soul and everything, but then Dempsey is like, yo, now let me do it. Come on. So then Dempsey goes over to his little cryopod and he turns off the life support, where that's when he dies. And you see Richthofen kind of looks at him and gives him a little pat on the shoulder. You know, feels a little bad, I suppose, despite being a
sociopath canonically.
Death, soul, me. Good tank.
Now that they got Dempsey's soul, we're going on to the second fracture, and this is called the Prototone, Pudishan. I don't know. So in this fracture, Division 9 is still active because, you know, Group 9 through 5 is not as powerful now. They didn't have the time to, like, overtake it and everything, I'm assuming. They created a brand new facility on an island and called Setsubo no Shima, or Island of the Dead? I think that's the translation. So this new facility was made after the Rising Sun facility actually, you know, got destroyed with Shinonuma. So I guess Shinonuma is kind of canon, sort of, or something. I don't know. It's a little weird there. And similarly to how Takeo became a test subject originally, the same thing happens here on Zetsubo no Shima. He's taken here instead of Shinonuma. But this whole facility is basically using plant-based and spider-based testing to create like weird fungal, like plant people weird shit. Very weird shit. It's creepy as shit. Fuck, this map is horrifying. So the Primus crew, they end up finding Takeo, now a mutated plant monster, and they end up defeating him. You know, I would expect so. You need the story to continue. And he ends up revealing to Primus Takeo that the reason Ultimus was there in the first place, or Ultimus Takeo I should say, to be more clear, is that the Emperor was extremely jealous of him and everything. That's why he was just sent there to be like, yo, go die. I'm tired of your ass, bitch. But after this, you can see Richthofen kind of has a little bit of remorse on his face because he was constantly talking about, you know, the Emperor. I have a letter from the Emperor. Takeo, my boy. I'm telling him to follow my orders. That's what the Emperor says. That's probably what he said about the letter. There's like 2 lines of dialogue he talks about it. He commits a little bit of the seppuku. I don't know if can even talk about seppuku on YouTube. Well, we're gonna find out based on if this video is demonetized or not. But as they go to leave Setsubo no Shima, that's when Richthofen tells them, hold on, there is a chain of events that must be set in motion. Just as Nikolai actually says in the first cutscene for the Giant, which shadowing.
Your eyes, my own. Takeo Musaki, a warrior, glory, honor, samurai, hero, same petty jealousy, evil amongst us, the Emperor. Lie, peace, kaishakunin, honor.
3 down, 1 go. 9 must set in motion.
The Chronorium would tell them in each possible reality, in every outcome of their journey, or in every universe, they die, cease to exist, or some other shit happens. So he decided this is when his greatest paradox comes in. The insurance policy, we'll call it. He wants to get those blood vials that we mentioned earlier. The problem is with those blood vials, they're going to be tied to dimensions that won't exist at the end of all this. At the end of Monty's scheme, we'll call it, none of them will exist. His plan is to get all of those blood vials after the creation of the perfect reality, because just possessing them and drinking them would create a paradox and preserve their lives. This Primus crew is that future version I talked about earlier that went to go visit Richthofen in the lab with Victis crew, or Time Shenanigans. I love it. No, I love it. So in this timeline, they just go grab the blood vials and leave. And I'm sure this will not be brought up again later. Following that fracture, we go to the final one, known as the Agonia fracture, where Division 9 actually managed to create dragons. Yeah, a little bit of a jump there from plants to fucking dragons, but this is happening during the Battle of Stalingrad in World War II, where it's kind of implied World War II never ends, or like this battle just keeps going, because The Russians were never able to stop Group 935 and the Germans in Stalingrad. So what they ended up doing is they actually steal the technology for the robots and the mechs to fight them back and everything. That's why you can kind of see there are giant robots around, but they look slightly different. Basically, the entire time, this is a constant battle between dragons and robots. Like it's a goddamn Godzilla thing going on, or whatever the fuck. Some Japanese anime is happening right now. But eventually, at some point, Element 115 actually leaks onto the battlefield. So now, there's robots, dragons, zombies, Russians, and Germans. All 5 of them fighting against each other all at the same time. This is also where another version of Sophia, or maybe the original version of Sophia, is put here. You know, that actually got turned into a robot following Kino. And she's kept to basically to be the leader of the facility that they have there in Stalingrad. Primus actually arrives in the air for some reason. They were falling from the sky and everything, and they find a dead Peter McCain from this universe, from the universe they were in, or the alternate fracture, whatever you want to call it. They use his parachute to fall down, where they find Ultimus Nikolai in a mech, but he ends up being trapped under debris because he's trying to fight the dragon. The dragon's like, eat! And while they're there, they need to go get help from Sophia to free Nikolai and everything and restore his mech. But along the way, they actually end up finding Gersh from the original timeline. Yeah, this timeline, not the fraction, this timeline. They find him because, you know, they released Gersh, he was just kind of just fucking around, floating between dimensions. Somehow he's been driven insane, but it doesn't matter because Sophia does a little bit of the gun to the head. Wished he was dead because she wanted all the information he had, I guess, across the universes he has or whatever. In the end, Sophia ends up becoming freed. She just kind of just leaves. The robot ends up flying and just leaves. So she goes to Maxis in the house and everything because I don't know. She kind of just disappears until the end of the Revelations Easter egg. But we'll get there. It's a little weird. So they end up helping Ultimus Nikolai fight the dragon, but it also throws him into a drunken rage where he fights the Primus crew. He's like, fuck this. I don't surrender. And fucking hell, this fight was great. The Russian anthem is playing, and Nikolai is kind of just being a badass despite being one of the hardest fucking bosses, I think, in all of zombies. Because for the most part, you die in like 2 shots, depending on the shit you have, perks or whatever. Because PhD Flopper you can get on the map and it doesn't stop the rockets from blowing you up. Fucking hell. I'm getting sidetracked because I love this boss fight. So in the final encounter, Primus Nikolai speaks to Ultimus Nikolai about how he knows everything about him. They're the same guy. And he actually reveals, more to the player really, that they both suffered the same loss, losing their first wife during the German bombings in the war. And following this, Ultimus tries killing him, but it doesn't work because you got that nice body armor, and that's coincidentally where this bullet hole showed up, even though he had that bullet hole back at Origins. So I don't know if they got lazy with the model or they just cycle stuff. So then following this, put all the souls up to the house and they teleport there.
Drunk Nikolai, I saw him surrender.
Russian never surrendered! Kill me. Sorry, same pain. Alcohol-fueled haze. You loved and you lost. You know what I speak of. She was taken from us, forgotten for a reason!
Done. Souls, Maxis.
And in the house, they actually destroy the teleporter and everything, because now, ideally, they're supposed to be in the perfect dimension, or they've secured the perfect reality and everything. There's nothing to worry about anymore. But there'd be no game if there was no more problems, so that's when we get to the next part of this. They're all in the house in Agartha, the main crew is there, the children are there, Auntie, Maxis, Samantha, all of them. This is where Primus crew actually meets a child version of themselves, and Dr. Maxis actually is here still, but he has no soul because, you know, he just came as the brain from the Maxis drone. So unfortunately, due to this, he does not resist the calls of the Shadow Man from the summoning key, because I guess a soul matters with making decisions, something. And this would end up switching the Shadow Man and Maxis. They like swap positions. So now Maxis is in the summoning key, and now the Shadow Man's free. Yay! He ends up releasing all the Apothicons upon the Agartha and everything, and they start wreaking havoc across the entire universe, everything. Because now the entirety of Agartha has colliding worlds, timelines, dimensions, and a bunch of places the characters have been and you kind of see a little sneak peek of in the opening cutscene. You kind of see them throw the rock that goes to Shinonuma, it looks like almost, which is pretty fucking crazy. But before the final confrontation with the Shadow Man in there, following, I'm not gonna get into the weird Easter eggs because it's stupid. None of it makes any sense. It's just random shit because Jason Blundell wanted to do a little bit of the look, I'm an intellectual. Not an intellectual. Maybe a little bit. He's pretty smart from what I've seen about him. He's pretty smart. I'll say that. Also, it's an important thing to note. The maps that we go on are not always the true version. They're like weird versions, kind of like multiverse thing where there's different versions of the original maps. Kind of cool. A+. I give you an A+ for that one. Applied right before the final confrontation with the Shadow Man. At some point, Rick Topman says, "Yo, drink that blood," because he gives all the blood vials to all of them. And this somehow combines their blood with the blood vials from drinking. I don't think that's how digestion works and all that, but whatever, I guess. And as I said before, this somehow makes them like different people, and this creates the the biggest paradox. They should not be able to exist since Dimension 63 destroyed the Apothicons. The original dimension is destroyed because the corrupted Maxis was there and fucked everything up. And Victis is basically in Purgatory in a pocket dimension. So, along with the mobsters, yeah, they're also in a pocket dimension, you could say. So then, going through this, the Shadow Man tries to warn the Primus crew that Dr. Wani is actually evil, and a bunch of other shit with that. And honestly, we should have gotten the alternate ending. Should have been 2 endings. I would have very much loved that. Just like Mom of the Dead, you were keen to it the whole time, but whatever. They end up killing the Shadow Man. In the end, Maxis ends up absorbing all the children's souls, along with Sophia, like combined with another, I guess with the summoning key or some shit. And they seal away all the Apothicons with the children's souls and everything. And all evil from Agartha is vanished, basically. But it's kind of fucked up. There's no children now. They're all gone. Samantha's gone. Everything. After all the dust settles, Dr. Monty does find out what they did with the blood vials and the paradox and everything. So he decides, you know what? I have a solution. I have a response to that. I have a negate in my hand. Counter spell. Don't play the game anymore. Get fucked, idiot. So he sends them back in time to the Great War to fix this whole paradox and everything. This fix would place them, yet again, in another perpetual cycle of repeating these events over and over again. Because they're in the Great War, they die, they get reincarnated in the future version, basically. They do it all again. It's all one big circle. That's all it is. It's like that thing when they say like time is a very long curved line or some shit. I've heard that line somewhere where it's like the universe or like time is like slightly curved and eventually we'll get into a circle in like a gazillion years or some shit. I don't know. It's something with the universe, shenanigans. But I'm not a fucking astroscience, mega science, ultiverse Scientologist, so I don't know.
The funny, you shouldn't be here. Fading out of existence. Blood vials. Can't be here. Paradox my perfect world at risk. Bloody free will. Can't stay here. Send us somewhere else. Corner in history. Dumb as shit. White existence. Works out perfectly.
During that time in the Great War, a couple things actually do happen that are important. So they get allied with the Wolf King, which, I don't know, King of Wolves, I guess. I don't know what you want me to say. That's all it is. So they ally, they instruct him to actually make Der Eisendrache for Eagle's Nest and everything. And then, you know, as I said before, they die. Then their younger selves will be reborn. Originally, Richthofen's plan was to only save his soul. That was the whole original plan. He didn't care about the other 3, really. Over time, watching them kill themselves, he kind of started, like, actually feeling, despite being a canonical sociopath, he wanted to bring them along and just keep them alive as well. This cycle would continue seamlessly to no end. Like, each one is truly infinite, as the crew would also lose their memories through Element 115, dimension hopping, you know, teleporting with Richtofen, basically just losing their minds, almost like Primus is becoming Ultimus in a way. You can kind of see it with some of their lines and how they act towards the end of Revelations. It could also be a thing where they don't have souls anymore, which, I mean, does kind of add up, because you ever think about it, after that first thing with Dempsey, he doesn't really do much for the rest of it. Like, I don't think in the cutscenes, the ones with no souls afterwards, I don't think they have any lines, now they mention it. Because in that first one, Dempsey mainly speaks, but I guess it could also be that they're doing it where only the main person they're focusing on gets to speak. But I don't know, I'm not the developer, so I don't know. It could be what Jason Blundell was going for. Props to him if that's what they were going for, where they have no souls or some shit. Inevitably, the multiverse is doomed to continue this forever, and ending only in Dr. Monty living in his perfect world with no other souls, being able to live in peace on his own. Now that ending sounds kind of ass, right? Especially with all the hype towards the alternate ending that never happened. Yeah, I'm a little pissed off too. Now, unless Richtofen was never the one meant to break the cycle. It was never him to begin with. Because somewhere, eventually in this entire constant cycle, there's only one person who's remembering everything in these cycles. The Weasel. The Weasel is the only one that's keeping somewhat of his memories with every cycle rendition. So eventually, somewhere in the timeline, we don't know how many times this could be going, I don't know. At some point, he breaks the cycle in Mob of the Dead. He kills the other 3 mobsters in the pocket dimension. In the Chronorium, as it contains all history across all dimensions, but it pertains to the user reading it. I guess so. It doesn't contain every little thing that happens. It only contains stuff that happens and affects the main reader. Like, if I were to read it, it would say my birth, but it wouldn't say anything about, like, the birth of some random guy across the world that I will never meet. Like, I guess it's how it works. But then suddenly, it actually manages to change. It should be impossible. It doesn't make any sense. When they go to get the blood vials after Zetsubo no Shima, that's when it starts to change. When they arrive in Alcatraz, they are in an incorrect part of the prison and they're at the wrong time. And this is when Blood of the Dead starts. The most disappointing map, other than lore. I like the lore of it, but that's all I like about it. Everything else I hate. As Richtofen says in the cutscene, we should have been closer to the lab. And if you remember from the comics, when they go to the lab, in the comics, the Richtofen that's there with the Chronorium, he literally says, right on time. But then when they show up in the Blood of the Dead, he says, you're late. Because they start reading, both of Richtofen start reading it, and they're like, what the fuck has changed? What do we do? The Warden ends up actually trapping the 4 of them all in the pocket dimension as originally planned by the Shadow Man. With the Chronorium changed, the only way for all of them to escape the prison is listed by the book. But Richtofen desperately tries to just find a different means to escape. He's trying to do everything, but nothing's working. It's kind of implied here, kind of like with these other with trailers for the other maps, that they're stuck in a cycle. So all of Richtofen's means of escape were fruitless. Nothing happened. And unless they find a different way out, they're going to be stuck living like the mobsters once were. As it continues to change the past and the present, it's actually revealed Richtofen was the sole survivor of the Great War. And eventually, while the Primus crew is fighting back against the Ward and everything, Richtofen is ultimately forced to do a great sacrifice. He needs to drain all of the blood from his body to create a portal to escape. Just for him though, not the Apothecons, because I don't know, I guess the Shadow Man can't do it now. Because his blood has been so charged with the Aether and Element 115 that he's able to use to open and close portals as he desired, pretty much. But then it's revealed that the Great War Richtofen, the one that got sent back, actually created a teleporter in the past that's for him to travel through space and time. So eventually he sends himself to the Alcatraz lab and he hides himself in there with for some reason only the fire elemental gem. I don't know why that's so important, but he stays in the cryo chamber until this whole Blood of the Dead fight. This Richtofen ends up helping them, finish off the war and everything. He then, unfortunately, they have to leave Primus Richtofen to die in the machine and destroy the blood files that they once had to get rid of the insurance policy as he says, the cycle is broken, Herr Doktor. So then afterwards, Nikolai is the last one to be entrusted with the Chronorium, as he's the only member of the entire cycle still has a soul.
Mind blood! Take mind blood! Ah!
Richtofen! No! Quickly! We must pull him out! They are free.
We win?
No, my mortal soul.
Not necessary. Future changed.
Chronorium.
Your true calling. Keep your soul. Defeat Monty.
Who?
I am still here. My God. What have I done? Going to let me bleed to death. The cycle is broken, Herr Doktor. Insurance policies. No, sorry, not. No. No, you can help me. You're a doctor. Wait. Don't you know who I am? I have been witness to miracles and calamities. Dimensions born and collapse. I walk a path no other can take. No! I want to be me. Someone who did all the hard work. I wanted to keep going. This me. My slightest heart. You won't even remember.
Fucking marker is almost empty. Yeah. So now, as you can see, I've added a new timeline here to better explain this whole new broken timeline that's going on now with Blood of the Dead and everything. So as you can see here, start with Mob of the Dead and the Broken Cycle, 1933. Then you got Blood of the Dead happening a little bit after, whenever Victis goes into cryosleep in the 1930s, still in Dimension 63. So following Richthofen's death and sacrifice, they actually go to Groom Lake first, and that's where they get the Ultimus crew, because as you know, they are still there captive following the end of post-Moon and comic shenanigans that happened and everything. So they go there, they find him, and this is when Nikolai's new plan is actually shown. He wants to create a brand new universe, free from any corruption, no Dr. Monty, no Shadow Man, and this could only be done with the Agarthan device.
Destroy time travel bullshit. Your body.
Vodka. Drink yourself to oblivion, make a difference.
Oh, scheiße.
Come with us. There is a war.
What kind of war?
The Great.
You see, finally came back like ages like later that we mentioned in the timeline, like probably like an hour ago, however long this video is. Jesus, long as shit, man. After that, they get the 4, and then they go to Alpha Omega or Camp Edward / Newtown Zombies. Like you get the idea. In the Ultimus timeline now. This is where Russman was supposed to go there, because as I said before, he goes there earlier with his other buddy, and they send a sample of the Avogadro to the Hanford facility in transit. See, it's all making sense. It's actually pretty good storytelling. A plus, I'll say here for the story at least. They go to Camp Edward, they find the elemental shard, and in this broken cycle, because, you know, the Ultimate Universe still has to happen, they are actually the ones that sends the Avogadro to the Hanford facility, and they are the ones who set off the nuke. Not Marlton when he was fucking around with some shit or whatever. So at this time, Max is preparing to teleport Samantha and Richtofen's soul, call him Eddie, from the house to the rest of the crew. But at the same time, Dr. Monty is starting to notice what's going on, how there's like a broken cycle and things aren't going the way they're supposed to be. He sees the changes they're producing, he's like, whoa, I gotta stop this. So he tries to stop Maxis from teleporting them, but Maxis does end up teleporting the other two, but he ends up being killed by Dr. Monty. The whole crew meets up with Sam and Eddie. They decide, you know what, we're gonna go fight Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man back in the Great War.
Chronorium predicted.
We have the elemental shard. Hooray! Too late!
Maxis.
Monty. What? Too late.
Shit. Samantha.
Boy.
Us.
The war, the great war. Kill him! Burn it all! Agarth! Aether! Infinite! Everything!
They spend their time gathered, they bond with one another over drinks and food. Now they're, preparing to go for their final battle. And the full crew had one part of the Garthan device, but they still need 2 more parts. They need the Apothecon blood, the Vril device. Vril device or the Vril? See, this is why I hate the whole like Vril device, Vril vessel, Vril dick, the golden rod. Like they're all different things, but they're all look the same. The one that Richthofen doesn't have, the one not like the sphere looking one, not this one that he uses on Moon, the big one. I'll show you somewhere here. You'll see it. So they actually need to get these from the Siberian facility. That's when we get to the final map. However, they need somebody else to do this as they're, bonding with each other at this time. That's when they wake the Victis crew from their cryo sleep back in Mob of the Dead, or Blood of the Dead, whatever you want to call it. He wakes them up, and they start talking to him through Richthofen, and they teleport him out of Alcatraz Island, and they teleport them to the Siberian facility, or Call of the Dead, now Togder Toten we'll call it, because it's now daytime. This is back in like 1965, so this is like right after the Ascension group starts falling apart and everything. Or whenever Yuri, no, not Yuri, fuck, I forgot the doctor's name, but the doctor that's with Ascension goes to bring the Apothecon blood to Pablo Marinus. This next part, I don't really have much of a script here, because I'm kind of just want to go off of like, I guess how I feel about it and everything, and how I kind of love this ending, even though it is very bittersweet, but it's got to end somewhere. Story's got to end. So we get to Togder Toten, where it's actually revealed while the crew was bonding and everything, their final like feast and everything, it's revealed that Zombie Richthofen is actually there as well. He's the one actually communicating to Stullinger about what they have to do in Togder Toten. There's not much that really happens other than like the bonding moments with the group that goes on over the campfire and everything, and you could hear at some points throughout the Easter egg. But summarize the key moments here. So they go through and they find the Vril, whichever one it is, in a safe that Richthofen had hidden in the facility, and then they calm down the Apothecon blood, and then they end up capturing it and using it with the Vril whatever. I'm calling it the Vril whatever now. The device, vessel, whichever one we're looking for now. And they end up taking it to the... If I remember how the Easter egg goes correctly. This is why you need a script, folks. Use a script. Don't go off your head. They're talking to the Hermit the whole time as well. You can probably guess who he is at this point, but we're not supposed to know yet.
In the game, you don't know until the very end, but pretend we don't know.
So the crew, they go through the whole thing. They get the Apothecon blood and everything. They actually take it and put it into the golden Pacamus machine that's on the map, and it basically shifts the entire. I don't even know how to explain it other than like it's the dark ether, it's the reverse. Instead of ice, it's all fire now and everything. And this is when like the most badass section of the entire game goes on. I fucking love this ending with the fucking, you got Kevin Sherwood going ham on the fucking guitar, going like Mach 17,000 with how he's going and everything. And then fucking, oh, it's so good. Oh, the final fight, it's so hectic, but it's so much fun. They get the Vril device, the vessel and everything, and they take it to the Hermit, and then that's when the Hermit has his final cutscene with the crew, and he reveals to them that he's Pablo Marinus. It was him the whole time. He was the original Mexican from the beginning and everything. He was the one that was always there the whole time. He gets sent back to the Great War, back all the way in the past. The Victis crew does end up giving the Vril vessel device and everything with the Apothecon blood to the original crew all the way back at the campsite. And that's when we get to the final cutscene, and god, it is so bittersweet, but I don't hate it. I really don't hate it. I feel like just playing it would be better than just talking about it.
Comrades, As we toast our victory, I want each of you to think about what you really want. Where would you like to go now? Believe me, you can have it.
Hello? Richthofen? Has something gone wrong? We did everything you asked! You haven't forgotten about us, have you?
No, Sammy. I haven't forgotten about you.
It is time, Richthofen. The multiverse must come to an end. The paradox must be resolved. At least, it will be quick.
What are you talking about? We found the Agarthan device!
I know. And I'm so sorry.
Me too, Richthofen. We fought for what we wanted. We got more than we deserved. All the chapters of our lives, good and bad. Even if there was no witness, even if no one cared to see, it still happened somewhere. We fought the Great War over and over, but victory could never be ours. We were always doomed to fail. Monty told us the truth. Our journey is the very reason this madness exists. We are the ones who fractured the universe. This is the truth the Chronorium showed me. The truth Richthofen could no longer face. When we are gone, so too is everything that spewed forth from the Aether. Element 115, the Apothecons, even Monty himself. All of it will be banished to where it belongs. The Dark Aether. We should not be here. Our time has passed. But for all the pain and torment we have endured together, as we leave this life behind, it is my hope that you know one thing beyond any doubt.
Look away, Eddie.
You are more than just my allies. My brothers in arms. You were my friends. would like to return to my home, my beloved, before the bombs fell, if only to die by her side.
I see myself at peace, serene, sitting beneath a cherry blossom tree, listening to the joy of my children at play.
I think I'd like to teach medicine, maybe pathology.
You know, the more I think about it, the more I think I'd be a darn good DI. Get those kids toughened up.
I would like to be in favorite bar, but as long as I have vodka, I am happy man.
I would like to know for sure that I brought honor to my ancestors. The Emperor.
I should probably try to relax. Take up a hobby. Maybe I could open my own morgue.
Let me think about it. Wherever I go, you know I'll be kicking ass.
So yeah, that's how the ending, how it goes. That's what we get. Very bittersweet, as we all know we wanted them to, you know, have their happy ending, but ultimately, as I explained through the whole timeline, it was never gonna happen. They were doomed from the start. They were doomed to die in some way, but Richthofen's, I guess, selfishness and self-preservation was preventing them from actually curing the universe from all the zombies and the Apothecon shit and everything. So Richthofen and Nikolai, they kind of work together a little bit on it with the zombie one, where they kind of poison everyone, get them all killed, at least peacefully in their sleep somewhat. Although I don't know how peacefully it is when your fucking eyes are bleeding. Like, Jesus Christ, man, holy fuck. Ugh. But Nikolai, he ends up killing zombie Richthofen. Once he's done with the Victis crew, Richthofen ends up apologizing, as they end up being banished to the Dark Aether along with the rest of the zombies and basically all this timeline shit that's going on, all this evil timeline, we'll call it. Everything gets shoved in there, including the Victis crew, unfortunately, as they also had to be sacrificed for this whole thing to happen. And then Nikolai does, you know, the one wish he had, which was to make the one true universe free of all corruption and everything. With the device, you know, uses it. It's hard to talk about the ending, okay? I've been talking for like 2 hours on this, man. I fucking hurts. So then, in the end, Nikolai's still alive, but, you know, they all need to die. They're all connected with their souls. So he gives Sam the gun, and she ends up killing him. She has to be the one to shoot him, and then both her and Eddie end up going off into this new universe that's being made to be free of all corruption and everything. And as they walk along in their final send-off, each character goes off of, as Nikolai said in the cutscene, the one true wish that everyone wanted. And God, it feels so good to hear that. It's a good fucking ending, man. It's such a bittersweet but good ending, because it's just like, I sit there with like, and God, it hurts. Because like, we sat there, like 10 years, like a whole decade of our lives were dedicated to that whole series and the ending. And getting through every single Easter egg. God, it's a lot. It's a lot, man. I know, I seem more agitated because of talking about it. But there you go. There it is. There's the whole timeline. There's everything. Well, I hope you enjoyed me rambling for a little bit. And I think I had one fuck up somewhere with it. But I'm pretty sure I messed up the Russman part where I said he went back in the 70s when actually he goes after, like, around moon time. I think that was the only thing I fucked up in this whole thing. Maybe I fucked up some things here I had to change around. Because I didn't know Shangri-La is actually in the past. I thought the whole time it was still in the 2000s. But I guess that makes sense to be in the past. Listen, it's a little confusing because there's a lot going on. But I will say, obviously, this is not all me doing this. I know that 6-hour long video This is probably more of an abridged version of that a little bit, but hey, I don't want to take all the credit. That guy did way more work than I did. He got all the voice lines and everything, and he went through like more graphics and all that shit. He went through a bunch more stuff. Kudos to him. Kudos to the wiki I went through a couple of times, checking out actual dates, because you know dates are important with timeline shenanigans going on. I'm glad we got through this whole thing, and I'm glad we're at the end now. Surely nothing will go wrong with this. I'm just glad to be over with. It was a good time. It was a good time playing this series. I love going through the Easter eggs non-stop story. The characters were great. I've met 3 out of the 4 of them as well. I'm glad this is the end, and I'm glad nothing else will come of this. I'm glad, you know, even though Black Ops 4 is pushing it a little bit, at least we got a satisfying ending compared to Black Ops 3 one. Psych, you think it was over, did you? What you think? We need money! We need to make money off of zombies. You think it's not over yet? It's time for Black Ops Cold War! Whee! It's time to get into a new universe, a new timeline where nothing makes sense because some things are supposed to be non-canon, but then they're canon because fuck you, I hate the Cold War fucking zombie timeline and everything going forward.